This week's a little bit different because I'm getting ready for an art show. And one of the most important things you have to think about as an artist is how to present your artwork, and you have to think about your art as a product. Now that might not sound cool, and it's probably something they don't talk about in art school, but it's really important because art is a business. So in this case, I'm taking a work on paper, I'll mount the work on paper and then frame it. Let's go ahead and get started. To get started, the first thing I'm going to do is prime the raw plywood. This is 1/4 inch plywood. And I want to get a seal coat on here, and what I'm using is acrylic matte medium. I'll let this dry and then I'll lightly sand it, and then I'll put the second coat on, and that's when I'll attach the work on paper. I let the matte medium dry for about an hour. I'll use a slightly damp rag to remove any dust, and then the dry side of the rag just to remove any of the moisture. And now it's time for more of the matte medium. I applied the matte medium pretty heavy because the paper is going to absorb some of it. And so now I'm putting the artwork face down and placing the panel on top of the paper, and there'll be about 1/8 of an inch overhang all the way around. Once you have the panel down, you can adjust it a little bit. Now I'm going to flip the panel over and use this piece of paper, and now I'm using a clothes iron to help speed up the drying process, and it also helps to flatten out the paper. Now the painting is mounted on the panel, and I want to put a protective surface on the painting. So again, I'm going to use more matte medium. And this is acrylic matte medium, and then I'll brush it in. This way the painting doesn't need to be behind glass, and that's usually what you think of when you think of works on paper. I've let the matte medium dry, and now I'm going to turn the painting upside down and cut away the overhang. Now that the painting's mounted, I'll go downstairs and make a frame. And there's 3 measurements you need for the frame: the width, the height, and the depth. Now I'm using this piece of molding to make a frame inside the frame. This is what the painting will sit on and what the painting will be attached to. I've cut a scrap piece of wood at 1 inch, which is the depth of the painting, and I'm using this as a guide. As long as the scrap piece of wood is flush with the top of the frame, the piece of molding is in the right position. I let the lacquer dry overnight. You don't have to, because lacquer will dry in a few minutes. So I've taped out the frame with painter's tape, and now I'm getting ready to gold leaf the frame with imitation gold. Imitation gold is a lot easier to use than real gold, and it's also a lot less expensive. So the first step is to use an acrylic red clay, and I'm going to paint that on the edge here. I've got my 3rd coat of clay on the frame. It's sanded, and the next step is to apply the sizing, which essentially is glue, and that's what's going to adhere the gold leaf to the clay or to the frame. I'm just going to put a little bit on top of this. You don't need much. And then just brush this on. The gold leaf comes in 5x5 booklets, but I always cut it into strips like this when I'm working on frames because it's just easier to handle. You can find all of the gold leafing materials that I'm using in this project at easyleafproducts.com, and I'll have a link in the description. Now I'm using a cotton rag or an old t-shirt and a little shellac to rub through the gold leaf and reveal some of the red clay. Once the shellac dries, then I'll seal the gold leaf with a few thin coats of lacquer. Then I'll paint the inside of the frame a color. In this case I'm painting it white, but sometimes I'll paint the insides of the frame black, sometimes gray. But I always use an acrylic paint, and I always have a damp rag next to me. That way if I get any of the paint on the gold leaf, I can simply wipe it off with the damp rag.